Greetings, travelers, and Happy New Year. Welcome back to another episode of Stories on the Road. I am your storyteller, Wyatt Walton, and today I am going to be talking about a couple stories about some fights that my dad and I have both gotten into. Not with each other, but like physical fights that we've gone through in our lives. So, my dad and I, of course, are very different people. However, we both have one very similar thing where the only fights that we've ever gotten into our lives were because of a girl. And no, this is not simping. This is actually something completely different. It's essentially what men are supposed to do when they see something bad happen to anyone. So, first, I'd like to share what my dad has done. So, this story is about how my dad was at a bar with a couple of his friends, and all three of these friends that my dad had were black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, he and these friends of his were at a bar, and while they were at this bar, they saw a group of guys who were with a woman. One of the guys was completely drunk, and the woman said something that ended up angering him, and the man ended up striking her across the face. Well, the moment that happened, my dad got up along with a couple of his friends, and then that guy and his friends ended up getting up. So my dad thinks to himself, oh, well, we're doing this. One of my dad's friends goes over to one of the guys, hits him with a right hook, gets knocked out instantly. Black belt in jiu-jitsu, gets knocked out instantly. But the other two friends started beating on the other guys, and it was like 6 against 3, essentially. My dad gets one of the guys, he starts wrestling him down to the ground. They're both throwing hands, and my dad manages to get this guy into a headlock, and he's holding the guy in the headlock, and he's expending every ounce of strength and energy that he has to essentially knock this guy out by choking him. And by the time he finally chokes the guy out and gets him to pass out from a lack of oxygen to the brain, he looks back up. The other one of his friends is extremely hurt. The third friend is standing up. He's completely fine, and all the other guys that they were fighting are just knocked down, out cold. The cool thing about this was the bouncer of the bar let my dad and his friends stay inside and essentially gave them a free round of drinks, and then the other guys who were friends with the guy that struck the girl, they ended up getting kicked out of the bar. So that's one extremely crazy story of what my dad has done. My dad's done a lot of things. He's essentially the epitome of what a Florida man is. Like, everything that you've ever heard a Florida man doing, my dad has probably done it. My dad has been wrestling alligators since he was 7, and that's not an exaggeration. So, one of the fights that I have gotten into, and I remember this very clearly, I was homeschooled up until I got into 2nd grade, which is when I went into a public school. So, around my first month or so into public school, I had always been taught by my dad that if I ever seen a boy hit a girl, I have to stand up for them. So I essentially lived with that concept or mindset. So I specifically remember I was on the playground during recess, and I was on the slides. And across the playground, I saw a large group of kids who were around my age. And I was maybe 6, 7 years old, maybe? I'm not sure. I can't exactly remember, but I do remember the event very clearly. I was watching these group of kids, and one of the boys in this large group physically grabbed a girl and shoved her to the ground. And then, of course, me living with the morals that my dad had taught me, I immediately jumped off the slide. I didn't slide down. I literally vaulted over the railing and jumped and ran over to this kid that shoved the girl down, and I shoulder rammed into him and knocked him down. I ended up getting into a fight with this kid and one of his friends, and they both ended up like ganging up on me, and we were not essentially getting into a fist fight. It's more of like a wrestling brawl of some sort. I don't remember the fight itself very clearly, but I do remember one instance where the guy that had pushed the chick down. Oh fuck. The guy that had pushed the chick down ended up knocking me down to the ground, and I ended up going into like a defensive turtle shell type position, and he was coming at me from in front of me. So I did the only thing that I thought to do, and I ended up raising my legs, and I kicked this kid 3 times in the face as hard as I could. It was in the middle of winter, so I was wearing winter boots, so I think I might have, pretty sure that hurt. But anyway, he ended up going down. I ended up getting back up, and I started walking away. Then his friend came out of nowhere and tackled me from behind, got into an even bigger scuffle, and then eventually we all decided, you know what, this is stupid. We're just going to call it a day. We're done with this. Eventually, a year later, I ended up talking to that same kid, and I ended up finding out that the reason why he shoved the girl down was because she was mocking him and his family. So apparently I didn't know the full details, and I felt bad about it. So I apologized to him for it. But anyway, that's the story that I have for when I got into a fight. My dad has also gotten into another fight of essentially the same thing. This one wasn't much of a fight. It was more like my dad knocking some guy out. What happened was my dad was, again, at a bar, but this time he was by himself. He was about to leave the bar. He walked outside, and he saw this guy essentially beating this girl while he was drunk. And my dad ended up walking behind the guy, grabbed him by the shoulder, and turned around and clocked him in the jaw and knocked him out with a single punch. And then he told the girl to call the police, and he stayed with her to make sure that she was all right. Yeah. So essentially that's the story that I have about my dad and I both getting into fights, the only fights in our lives, and what they entailed. So when I tell the story, what I want to say is there is a difference between being a simp and being chivalrous. Chivalry is when you're able to put others' lives before your own, and you defend those that you know cannot defend themselves. That is essentially what a man has to do. It is one of our roles. We are sent down to this earth to protect. That is what we are meant to be. We are meant to be protectors. Those who abuse this role to instead be dictators or abusers, well, they essentially aren't men. A real man will stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. It doesn't matter who or what they are. Anyway, that's the story I wanted to tell. I'll end this with another fun fact. Did you know that Napoleon Bonaparte's wife, Josephine, used to have a pet orangutan, which she dressed in nobleman's clothes and taught it how to use silverware, especially with drinking tea out of a cup. So yeah, that's been another episode of Stories on the Road. I hope you guys are having a happy new year, and I hope that you are all doing well. And thank you for coming on this travel with me. Please like and subscribe for more videos. And again, If any of you all have a story that you'd like to share, please feel free to share in the comments down below. Happy New Year, everyone.